Have you ever wondered how someone can face entire armies alone? Imagine what it would be like to bear the weight of being the strongest, the most feared, but also the most solitary. The pain of not being understood, of fighting for something greater while everyone around underestimates your worth. This is the story of the Roman soldier who defied human limits. Today I will reveal the hidden truth behind his strength, his internal struggles, and what truly made him invincible. Get ready to uncover the secrets that made this man a legend. Picture a sky laden with grey clouds as the smoke of battle mingles with the scent of blood and dust. The deafening clash of swords against shields fills the air, alongside the cries of wounded soldiers. Amidst this scene of pure chaos emerges a man with a determination that seems immortal. His name? Publius Vibaculus, a centurion of the 12th Roman Legion, whose story would be told for centuries as an example of bravery and leadership. This was no ordinary day. Julius Caesar's legions were advancing through Gaul, a vast and treacherous territory inhabited by tribes who knew the land like the back of their hands. Caesar, always the strategist, knew his campaign would not be easy, but he relied on men like Vibaculus, warriors who not only followed orders, but inspired everyone around them. And on that day, inspiration would be needed more than ever. The battle began brutally. The Nervi, a Gallic tribe known for their ferocity, had planned a surprise attack. They emerged like shadows among the trees, their war cries echoing through the valley. The Roman strategy, based on discipline and formation, was shattered by the speed and intensity of the attack. It was as if the earth had spat out thousands of enemies all at once. At the heart of the battle was Julius Caesar, observing the field and trying to reorganize his troops. But the situation was worse than he had imagined. The soldiers of the 12th Legion, usually as firm as rocks, were being crushed by the Nervi's assault. The defensive line began to falter, and Caesar himself was surrounded by enemies. For the Romans, this was more than a battle. It was a matter of survival. It was then that Publius Vibaculus took action. Gravely wounded, but still standing, he saw the situation and made a decision that would change everything. He didn't wait for orders. There was no time for that. Vibaculus knew that if Caesar fell, there would be no more legions, no Rome, no glory. Grabbing his gladius, he charged forward, shouting to the men around him, "Follow me! Show these barbarians what it means to be Roman!" Have you ever tried to uncover what made Rome the greatest empire in the world, only to get lost in a sea of details? Don't worry, you're not alone. Imagine finally mastering the most decisive moments in Roman history, discovering the brilliant strategies of generals like Julius Caesar and Scipio Africanus, and understanding how their tactics shaped the destiny of the world. With that in mind, I've created the digital book, The 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire, where you'll gain access to a clear, objective analysis filled with exclusive curiosities. Discover how Rome won battles deemed impossible and become a true expert in Roman military history. Don't waste time. Click on the pinned comment and secure your copy right now. Act before the stock runs out. With each step, Vibaculus carved a path through the crowd of enemies. His shield was scarred with arrows and strikes, but he didn't stop. Around him, Roman soldiers who were about to retreat began to respond. Vibaculus was more than a leader. At that moment, he was a beacon of hope. He called the soldiers by name, encouraged them to fight, and used his own body as a shield to protect the most vulnerable. The fight was fierce. Vibaculus was surrounded by enemies who seemed endless, but he did not give up. When he lost his shield, he took another soldier's. When his strength began to waver, he looked at Caesar, still surrounded, and found the energy to continue. For him, the battle was not just a duty, it was a promise of loyalty to the general leading Rome. Meanwhile, Caesar, who usually remained calm in battle, watched the scene with a mix of concern and admiration. He saw Vibaculus alone break through the siege and lead the soldiers of the 12th Legion back into the fight. "Rome is with us," Vibaculus shouted, his voice echoing like thunder. And it was true. At that moment, Rome was not just a city or an empire. It was the courage of a single man facing the impossible, but the battle was far from over. The Nervi, realizing the impact Vibaculus was having, concentrated their attacks on him. Arrows and spears flew in his direction and he began to bleed. Every movement felt harder, every breath heavier. Even so, he did not stop. His spirit seemed unbreakable. When he finally reached Caesar's side, Vibaculus, bloodied and exhausted, did something no one expected. He smiled. "General, the line is secure," he said before collapsing from his wounds. The soldiers around him quickly carried him away, protecting the man who had saved Caesar's life and turned the tide of the battle. And so on that day, Vibaculus not only saved Caesar, but also showed the world what it meant to be a true Roman. His courage inspired the troops to counterattack with such force that the Nervii were defeated, and the victory became one of the most memorable of the campaign. But Vibaculus's story does not end here. His heroism in the battle against the Nervii was only the beginning of his legendary journey. In future battles, he would face new challenges, and his name would become synonymous with loyalty and unwavering strength. Stay tuned, because the next chapter will reveal how Vibaculus continued to defy fate, leading his men against even more formidable enemies. Before we move on, I noticed you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Don't miss out on all the content we always bring about Rome. In Julius Caesar's accounts of the Gallic campaigns, few soldiers receive as much attention as Publius Vibaculus. He is described as a symbol of courage and dedication, someone who never retreated, even when defeat seemed inevitable. His performance during the battle against the Nervii in 57 BC clearly illustrates why he became so famous. The Nervii were known for their aggressiveness and combat strategy. They attacked quickly and forcefully, using the terrain to disorient the Roman legions. During this battle, the Romans were caught off guard by an ambush. Chaos quickly ensued, and the Roman lines began to give way. Vibaculus, already wounded, understood the gravity of the situation. The Nervii attacked with such intensity that the Romans could barely respond. Leaders of the cohorts were dead or wounded. The standards that represented the strength and unity of the legions had fallen, and the morale of the soldiers was collapsing. Vibaculus, despite severe injuries that hampered his mobility, decided he could not stand by. He knew that allowing panic to spread would mean total defeat. Despite his condition, Vibaculus began encouraging the soldiers. He raised his voice to call out the centurions by name, reminding them of their duties and urging them to reorganize the troops. His orders cut through the noise of battle, bringing some sense of direction amid the chaos. Every word he spoke carried unquestionable authority, and the men around him began to respond. Vibaculus knew that, even wounded, his presence was crucial to motivate the soldiers. When Vibaculus was taken off the battlefield to receive medical care, he had lost a significant amount of blood and had not eaten for days. Even so, he couldn't rest. His focus was not on his own recovery but on the survival of his legion. Upon hearing that the battle was still critical, he defied medical orders and decided to return to the fight. Without a shield, he grabbed one from another soldier and headed back to the front lines. Vibaculus not only fought again, but also reorganized the men. His courage in the face of a numerous and well-prepared enemy inspired the soldiers to hold their positions. He called each soldier by name, reinforcing the importance of every individual in defending the legion. His determination, even when his body was on the brink of collapse, restored the soldiers' confidence. They took their positions again, renewed by their centurion's example. However, Vibaculus's wounds were too severe for him to continue for long. During the combat, he fainted, exhausted and bleeding. Other soldiers carried him off the field, knowing he had already done more than could be expected to save the legion. This battle cemented Vibaculus as a symbol of loyalty and unwavering strength. He fought not only against the Nervii, but also against the limits of his own body, demonstrating unparalleled commitment to Rome and his comrades. His actions not only prevented a complete collapse, but also gave the legion the chance to resist and reorganize their forces. Although the battle against the Nervii was one of the most challenging of his career, it was not the only moment Vibaculus proved his worth. His actions on this occasion were just one part of his journey as one of Rome's most respected and admired centurions. Imagine being called the strongest man by Julius Caesar. Tell me in the comments if you think Caesar's opinion was right, or if there was someone stronger. The sun was beginning to disappear on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, while the battlefield was plunged into chaos. Cries of pain and the deafening clash of steel echoed everywhere. The 12th Roman legion was on the brink of collapse. Surrounded by the Nervii, the Roman soldiers faced an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Order had given way to despair. Amidst the dust and blood, one man refused to give up. That man was Publius Vibaculus. Wounded and exhausted, Vibaculus knew the battle rested on his shoulders. With the cohort leaders fallen and the legion's standard toppled, he was the only figure who could restore order. Even as blood streamed from his wounds, he stood tall, leaning on his shield, and shouted with all the strength he had left, "Rome still stands. and as long as we stand, no one will pass." Those words cut through the chaos like a sharp blade. The soldiers who had been retreating began to respond. Vibaculus didn't just speak, he led by example. He pushed forward to the front line where the fighting was fiercest. Every movement seemed to drain what little energy he had left, but he kept going, striking enemies with his gladius, blocking attacks with his shield, and urging his men to stand their ground. The battle reached its climax when the Nervi launched a brutal attack in an attempt to break through the Roman lines. Vibaculus, despite his weakened state, positioned himself at the very center of the confrontation. He called the centurions by name, organized the ranks, and barked orders with a voice that left no doubt. He would not let the enemy advance. His presence turned despair into courage, and the soldiers began to regroup. The Nervi pressed hard, but Vibaculus, with his unyielding determination, led a counterattack. He used every ounce of his remaining strength to inspire the men to push the enemy back. Slowly, the Romans began to regain ground. The pressure eased, and the Nervi's advance was finally halted. But the effort came at a high cost. As soon as the enemy retreated, Vibaculus's body gave out. He fell to his knees, gasping for air, the blood from his wounds staining the ground beneath him. Before he could utter another word, he collapsed, exhausted and completely drained. The soldiers around him rushed to his aid, carrying him out of the combat zone. To them, Vibaculus wasn't just a leader. He was the reason they were still alive. The battle against the Nervi became a defining moment in the history of the 12th Legion. Thanks to Vibaculus's courage and sacrifice, the Romans managed to reorganize their forces and avoid a catastrophic defeat. Even off the battlefield, he was remembered by all as the man who turned the tide of a battle that seemed lost. But this wasn't the last time Vibaculus would risk everything for Rome. His journey was far from over, and his future deeds would continue to shape the destiny of the Roman legions. The courage he demonstrated that day was only a glimpse of what was to come. Before we continue, I noticed you forgot to like the video. Help us bring more content about Rome by giving it a thumbs up. 5 years after the battle against the Nervi in 52 BC, Publius Vibaculus once again showcased his leadership and bravery in the face of a critical situation. Julius Caesar's legions were surrounded by Germanic tribes known for their strength and skill in siege warfare. Trapped within a fortified camp, the Roman soldiers were exhausted, short on supplies, and with morale waning after hours of relentless combat. The Germanics intensified their attacks, using projectiles to further weaken the Roman defenses. The improvised fortifications were already failing, and the threat of total collapse loomed. Inside the camp, the tension was palpable. With no reinforcements in sight, the only option was a risky breakout. Faced with this dire situation, Vibaculus and the military tribune Gaius Volusinus decided it was time to act. They sought the support of one of Caesar's legates to organize a strategic retreat. Vibaculus knew that waiting would only worsen the situation. The only solution was to break the siege in a coordinated attack, relying on the soldiers' determination to carve a path to safety. He gathered the centurions and ordered the soldiers to take a brief respite from combat, shielding themselves from projectiles with their shields while catching their breath. During this pause, Vibaculus and Volusinus organized the ranks, dividing the men to ensure a solid formation. The plan was simple: attack with full force, capitalize on the element of surprise, and create a large enough breach to escape. At the decisive moment, Vibaculus took command, positioning himself at the forefront of the troops. He gave the signal, and the Romans charged with intensity, breaking through the camp's barriers and attacking the Germanics with ferocity. The initial impact was enough to destabilize the enemy. Motivated by Vibaculus's leadership, the Roman soldiers pushed the Germanics back, creating a gap in the siege. The Germanics quickly reacted, attempting to close the breach, but Vibaculus maintained control. He directed the soldiers, coordinating their movements to ensure the retreat was orderly. Despite sustaining injuries during the combat, Vibaculus stayed at the front lines until the very end, ensuring that no man was left behind. The retreat was successful, allowing the legions to escape certain defeat. Vibaculus's bold plan, combined with his steadfast leadership, turned an apparently impossible situation into a strategic victory. Once again, he demonstrated his ability to make swift, effective decisions amidst chaos. After the escape, Vibaculus continued organizing the soldiers, ensuring they were ready to face new challenges. His actions were crucial in preserving the Roman forces and reaffirming the discipline and fighting spirit of the legions. This effort further solidified his reputation as an exceptional leader, whose courage and strategy saved lives and ensured the continuity of Caesar's campaign. Although this was one of his most remarkable feats, Vibaculus's story would not end there. He would continue to face challenges that tested his leadership skills and loyalty to Rome. And don't forget to grab your digital book, 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. It's vital to get your copy now before it sells out. The battlefield was chaos. The sound of arrows slicing through the air and spears being hurled was deafening. The Roman soldiers were exhausted, surrounded by a Germanic force that seemed endless. The improvised defenses were nearing their limit, with every enemy blow causing the wooden walls to tremble. Defeat seemed only a matter of time. But then, amidst the desperate scene, Publius Vibaculus took command, changing the legion's fate with a strategy that united the men and turned the tide. Vibaculus, with his keen eyes, assessed the battlefield. He knew the key to surviving the siege wasn't continuing the disorderly fighting, but pausing, regrouping, and attacking with precision. He raised his voice, drawing the soldiers' attention amid the tumult. "Take cover! Regroup behind the shields! It's not over as long as we stand!" The pause was decisive. The soldiers raised their shields, forming a defensive barrier against the enemy projectiles. The noise quieted momentarily, but the tension in the air was almost unbearable. As the soldiers caught their breath, Vibaculus moved among them, calling the centurions by name, encouraging the men and reinforcing their much-needed confidence. His words were firm and direct. "You are Romans. Never forget that. Fighting together is what makes us unbeatable." When the ranks were organized and the men ready, Vibaculus executed the second part of his strategy. He arranged the soldiers into a compact formation, positioning the most experienced in the front line. The plan was simple yet bold: a coordinated attack on a specific point of the siege, creating a breach that would give the legion room to recover. Vibaculus knew the execution had to be flawless, which is why he himself would lead the charge. With his shield raised and gladius firm in his hand, Vibaculus took his place at the front. He looked at the soldiers beside him, and with a shout that echoed across the field, gave the signal to attack. "Advance! Show them the strength of Rome!" The formation began to move as a unit, each soldier protecting the next, advancing toward the enemy. The impact of the attack was devastating. The Germanics, caught off guard by the renewed strength of the Romans, momentarily retreated. The coordinated force of the advance broke through the enemy lines, creating the necessary opening for the Romans to re-establish their position. Vibaculus, always at the forefront, continued urging the men, "Hold the formation! Don't stop now!" The action was swift but enough to turn the tide. The siege, once suffocating, had become a battle with real chances for the Romans. When the breach was fully opened, the soldiers managed to reorganize their defenses and secure a safer position. Despite the intensity of the combat, Vibaculus remained with his men, ensuring every soldier understood that this turning point was the result of unity and discipline. The success of Vibaculus's strategy was undeniable. His leadership not only saved the legion, but also proved that even in the worst circumstances, a well-executed strategic decision can change the outcome of a battle. Vibaculus was not just a commander. He was the force that held the soldiers together, the living example of courage and determination. But that victory was not the end. The battle was far from over, and new challenges awaited Vibaculus and his men. The question now was, what more would this leader be capable of doing to protect his legions and secure the glory of Rome? Julius Caesar rarely singled out individuals in his accounts, but Publius Vibaculus was a notable exception. In his commentaries on the Gallic War, Caesar referred to Vibaculus as the strongest man, a recognition that reflected not only his prowess on the battlefield, but also his leadership and impact in critical moments. This praise extended beyond physical strength, though Vibaculus was renowned for his extraordinary endurance and skill with the gladius. Caesar's acknowledgement encompassed Vibaculus's ability to make quick and effective decisions under pressure, to lead soldiers in extreme situations, and to inspire confidence even in the most critical moments. His presence on the battlefield was an embodiment of discipline and bravery, traits essential for the survival of the Roman legions. Vibaculus was particularly lauded for saving Caesar's life during a decisive confrontation against the Nervi. In a situation where the general was exposed and vulnerable, with his troops at a disadvantage, Vibaculus acted decisively. He faced a superior enemy force, clearing a path to Caesar, shielding him, and ensuring his safe withdrawal. This action not only saved the Roman leader, but also restored the morale of the troops, who returned to the fight with renewed determination. The fact that Caesar mentioned Vibaculus by name in his writings underscores his importance. In an era when historical accounts often focused on collective achievements, singling out an individual was unusual and signified the magnitude of his deeds. Vibaculus was recognized not only as a skilled soldier, but as a leader whose presence could alter the course of a battle. The distinction given by Caesar solidified Vibaculus as a legendary figure within the legions. His courage, loyalty, and leadership made him an inspiration not only for his contemporaries, but also for future generations. Caesar's public acknowledgement ensured that Vibaculus's name remained synonymous with the strength and dedication that defined the height of Roman military power. However, the challenges faced by Vibaculus did not end there. He would continue to demonstrate his significance and reinforce the respect he had earned, both among the soldiers and before his general. His subsequent actions would prove why he was considered one of the greatest leaders of his time. Twilight covered Rome, a city immersed in change and conflict, as the name of Publius Vibaculus was still whispered among the legions. He was the centurion who stood out not only for his physical strength and tactical skills, but for the loyalty that defined him in a world of fragile alliances and frequent betrayals. Yet, as grand as his life was, his end remains shrouded in mystery. How could a man who faced so many battles and defied death itself disappear from history without leaving clear traces? Among the theories surrounding his death, the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC emerges as one of the most plausible possibilities. This confrontation, marked as a turning point in Roman history, pitted the armies of Mark Antony and Octavian against the forces of Brutus and Cassius, the leading conspirators in the assassination of Julius Caesar. Vibaculus, who had risked his life on multiple occasions to save Caesar, would have been unlikely to remain neutral in such a decisive event. It is believed that he fought alongside Mark Antony's forces, honoring the memory of his former general. But Philippi was a chaotic battlefield where thousands of lives were lost in a whirlwind of blood and dust. Vibaculus's name does not appear in the formal accounts of this battle, but that is not surprising. Many heroes were forgotten amidst the enormity of the conflict, their stories erased by the fog of war. If he truly met his fate at Philippi, it was likely while fighting with the same fierce determination that defined him during the Gallic campaigns. Another hypothesis, more personal and tragic, is that Vibaculus could not overcome the pain of Caesar's assassination in 44 BC. To him, Caesar was not just a leader, but the man to whom he had sworn unconditional loyalty, whose life he had protected in deadly battles. The brutality of the betrayal in the Senate may have broken something inside Vibaculus. Historians speculate that, devastated by a sense of helplessness and a loss of purpose, he may have taken his own life. This theory finds support in the psychological toll that a betrayal of such magnitude could have on someone so intensely loyal. There is also the possibility that Vibaculus simply chose to withdraw. After years of wars and losses, he may have decided to live out his final days in silence, far from the turbulent politics dominating Rome. Perhaps he settled on an isolated farm or in a quiet village, fading from the historical stage while the empire continued to spin around intrigues and conflicts. Regardless of the truth, the mystery surrounding his death adds to the fascination with his figure. Vibaculus was not just a soldier. He was an unyielding force who inspired loyalty and respect. His absence from the final records only fuels his legend, leaving space for each person to imagine the fate of one of Rome's greatest heroes. What is undeniable is that his story is not defined by how he died, but by how he lived. Vibaculus remains a symbol of what it meant to be a true Roman, fearless, loyal, and tireless in the face of adversity. His name, etched in Caesar's words and the memory of his legions, echoes through the centuries, reminding us of the strength and sacrifice that shaped the greatness of Rome. Yet questions persist. Did Vibaculus face his final challenge on a battlefield, in an act of despair, or in the solitude of obscurity? Perhaps the answer is lost forever, but one thing is certain: his story continues to intrigue us and enrich the legacy of one of history's most fascinating eras. Publius Vibaculus is one of the clearest examples of courage and leadership in Roman history. He was not just another centurion in Rome's vast army. He was a leader who stood out for his ability to make quick and precise decisions, even in the most extreme situations. Vibaculus showed that the role of a leader is not just to give orders, but to inspire confidence, maintain unity, and fight side by side with his men. His ability to lead under pressure saved entire legions on multiple occasions. Vibaculus was the kind of leader who, even when gravely wounded, refused to abandon his soldiers. He believed that the strength of an army lay in its discipline and unity, and that a commander should be the first to set an example. His actions in battles, such as saving Caesar's life or organizing desperate attacks to break sieges, demonstrated his unparalleled ability to turn the tide in crucial moments. More than his victories, Vibaculus left a legacy that transcends battles. He personified the fundamental values of the Roman army: bravery, loyalty, and commitment to duty. He led not just with physical strength, but with strategic thinking and unwavering dedication that inspired the soldiers around him. He was the kind of leader who made every soldier feel that their role was vital, no matter how dire the situation. The mystery surrounding his death only adds an intriguing layer to his legacy. Although the exact circumstances of his end remain unknown, his actions and influence live on in Caesar's records and the memory of Rome's military history. Vibaculus serves as a reminder that even in an empire as vast as Rome, the actions of individuals can shape the course of historical events. We conclude here the narrative about Vibaculus, but Rome's history remains rich with extraordinary figures. So what did you think about uncovering the hidden truth behind the strongest Roman soldier, who literally faced entire armies alone? Publius Vibaculus was not just an incredible warrior, but also an example of courage and leadership that inspired generations. His story proves that determination and loyalty can change the course of history, even in the darkest moments. And remember, whenever you want to learn more about how Rome became the most powerful empire of antiquity, just go to the pinned comment and grab your digital book, 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. Get your copy today because the units are limited. If you were impressed by his feats, imagine how many other incredible stories of Rome are yet to come. So don't waste any time. Subscribe to the channel now and make sure to like this video to support the content. It helps us so much to keep bringing these epic stories to you. See you in the next video.